Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Today I want to talk about my recent trip to Spain to ride some of the Spanish TET. I'm going to go through what my plan was, how the bike performed on and off-road, how the luggage performed because I used the Rhino Walk throw over frameless bags, how I managed for accommodation because I didn't book anything ahead, and what problems I had, and there were problems, and what the conclusion, what would I do differently, and also talk about the next trip. So the plan was to get a ferry to Bilbao with Brittany Ferries from Portsmouth, which is sadly a two overnight trip, which is a pain in the neck. Get to Bilbao, ride down to Alcañiz, which is on the east side of Spain, and then overnight, and then start doing the TET from Alcañiz, which is only about 10 kilometres into section 20 of the Spanish TET. And then my plan was to just keep riding the TET until I got to a point where I needed to start thinking about getting back to the north of Spain to get the ferry back home. So, in terms of the trip, my dream, if you like, my vision was that I would be riding along in the mountains on a trail, and I'd be enjoying the vistas of Spain, which you can only do from the top of a mountain, and I thought that would be amazing. Having done some of the TET in the north of Spain in October, where I sort of got to the top of the mountains and stopped and thought, wow, this is bloody amazing. My plan was to do exactly the same thing, but on a different part. So my plan was to ride down the east side, get to sort of Granada, keep going and see what happened. Anyway, got the ferry. 2 overnights on a Brittany ferry is not recommended. I could have gotten 1 overnight, which would have gone from Plymouth, but Plymouth is 200 miles, Portsmouth is only 165, so I opted for the shorter route in the UK. Got to Bilbao, never been to Bilbao. Bilbao was lovely actually. I mean, you got the North Mountains literally on the edge of the town. It was really nice, and I rode up into the mountains and went to Alcañiz where I was overnighting. It was about 400 odd kilometres, no motorways. I'm not interested in motorways. And I overnighted in a Parador and I'd stayed there before. I've stayed there a couple of times. And it was very nice. I mean, Paradors, you know what you're getting. Breakfast was great and substantial. And then the next day, so this was I left on the 7th, that was the 9th. So on the 10th of April, I headed for the TET in Alcañiz. And I found the route after a bit of faffing around. It's not always easy to follow the TET. But anyway, I found the route. Went down a couple of tracks that were completely not the right route, and then got into the groove, and I was riding the TET, and it was good. Weather was great. Up to this point, I have not had a single drop of rain from the moment I left home here to where I am on the TET right now. No rain at all. And I did some riding, and I got to a point where I needed to book an overnight hotel. Because on this particular trip I have not booked any overnight accommodation. The only overnight I'd booked was in Alcañiz, and my plan was to ride, get to about 3:30, 4 o'clock, think about how far I needed to go, and then book a hotel. Well, so that's what I did, and I got to a hotel, overnighted, carried on. Now I'm on section 20 of the TET, and then I'm moving on to section 21 and then section 22. Now, on section 21, and you'll see from the picture that's on the screen, there is a star, a little red circle with a white star in the middle. Now, that means something. Obviously it means something, otherwise they wouldn't put it there. So I was riding up on this mountain, and it was a pretty tough trail. I mean, it was reasonably challenging, but you could make good progress, and the bike was doing fine. And and on the screen appeared this note that said easy go back point. Now I have no idea what easy go back point means. I've never seen this on the screen before, but also I don't know what does it mean. Does it mean easy go back point if you're going that way, or easy go back point if you're going that way? So I'd already done a reasonably tough bit, so I thought, well, maybe, bearing in mind I've got no idea what this actually means, and it's all very well saying easy go back point, but where do you go back to? So I thought, well, I'll just carry on. So I did carry on, and I went over a couple of mountains, over some big ridges and some, pretty interesting stuff. And I got to a point where I was going down. I could see this valley, this quite steep mountain in front of me, going down to a valley, and you could see trees and wood, a meadow. And I got to a point where I was basically in a track about maybe 1.5 meters wide, and it was. I mean, all you could describe it as is a storm gully, because it had extremely steep sides, and in the middle of this sort of V were big boulders and small boulders and gravel and loads of stuff that you didn't really want to ride on. And on the edge was literally about 2 tyre widths wide of relatively flat ground. Well, there's no way you could ride on the slopey bits because it's too steep. If you go on one of these, you might go sort of 20 metres, 30 metres, 50 metres and realise actually you should be on this one. And then you've got a right pain to try and get across. So anyway, I got to this point, and I sat there and I'm looking down this very, very steep gully thinking, well, this is interesting. So I switched the engine off and I sat there for a moment, and I thought, well, I can't turn round. I mean, turning round really isn't an option, certainly on my own. If I was with 3 other people or 2 other people, you'd think, right, let's all work to get the bikes turned round and we'll go back. But I was on my own. So anyway, I had no alternative but to go down. So I left the engine off, and I basically paddled with my feet down the middle of this gully. And I didn't need the engine. I mean, if I'd been on tick over, I'd have been going too fast. There was absolutely no point in the engine running. So the gravity was just sending me down this slope. And it went on for, 500 metres. Because I'm at the top of a mountain and I'm going to end up at the bottom of the mountain. So obviously it's a blooming long way. And it just went down and down and down, almost pretty much in a straight line. I mean, there were very few corners to negotiate, and even they were only just slight bends in the road or track or gully. So and I got to the bottom, and I was thinking, "Whew, that was a blooming tough one." And I thought to myself, well, if someone had been going in the other direction, I would estimate there's probably only a dozen people in the whole world that would be able to get up that slope, because getting down it was extremely difficult. Getting up it would have been, like I say, there's probably a dozen people globally that could do that, and I'm certainly not one of them. So I was thinking, well, that's a relief. Got to the bottom of this valley, lovely meadow, there was cows grazing and trees, and there was a little river. It was very pretty, and you think, well, actually it was probably worth it just to get to this bit. And then I sort of found my way out. I was still on the TET, I was still on the route, and I carried on. Anyway, overnighted, next day, and I'm on the east side of Spain, which is dry and dusty, and there were a lot of flat bits on this bit of TET. I had my Garmin with me, as well as my rugged phone, which is the one I was using to navigate the TET on. And I had the Garmin on at the same time. And very often the Garmin would be showing that I was in the middle of nowhere, which in a lot of times I was. But other times I'm riding on the TET on a gravel track, and it's saying, well, actually you're on a road, because you were on a road, it just didn't have any tarmac on it. It was an unpaved road. And after doing that for a couple of days, the challenging bits were very challenging. and those the sort of the unpaved roads were just boring. And so you're riding along. If you're on a challenging bit, all you're watching is the sort of the next 5 to 10 meters of road. That's all you're focused on because you've got to. So you can't look around. And when you're on the gravel tracks, you can't look around because although you can go a bit faster, the gravel varies. You know, it varies from a reasonable surface to quite deep gravel. Or there's potholes, or so I mean, you're focused all the time on what you're doing. And bearing in mind, I'm on my own, so you know, on the TET website, there's a whole sort of disclaimer before you can download a GPX file that basically says you shouldn't do this on your own. You're doing something exceptionally dangerous. We take absolutely no responsibility whatsoever. If you decide to do this, good luck. So bearing all that in mind, you know, my focus was on staying upright, and I'd be pleased to tell you that I did stay upright for the whole journey. I had a couple of dodgy moments. I mean, I stalled the bike probably about 20 times. Never fell off. Stopped on a very steep slope and nearly sort of slid backwards several times, but generally it was fine. You know, the TET is a wonderful thing because someone's actually taken the trouble to create it, and being privileged enough to be able to use it is a lovely thing. But, and it's a big but, it can be a bit dull. And probably there will be people maybe watching this that will think, dull? How can you say the TET is dull? But it is dull simply because you're not seeing what you're going through unless you stop. Because you can't. You cannot see where, you know, enjoy the vistas that you will be riding through because you've got to focus on this 5 to 10 meters in front of you. And my sort of my enjoyment of touring, and if you followed the channel long enough, I love touring, as you will know, is to see places. I want to explore places. And you know, I love riding through little villages and seeing some wizened old girl sort of sitting on a bench talking to her neighbour, and stopping at a little bar for a coffee, and you can sit outside and watch the world, and I like that sort of thing. And I found that being on the TET, because you're largely in the middle of nowhere, you don't have that same experience. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that for me, I didn't want to do as much as I'd planned to do, because my plan was 8 days doing the TET, 2 days back to the north of Spain to get the ferry. Well, I did 500 kilometres on the TET. So I gave it a fair crack. I did 3 sections, 20, 21 and 22. And by then, after sort of 3 days or 4 days, whatever it was, 3 or 4 days of riding the TET, I'd had enough. So I decided to change tack and turn it into a road trip. And so I was not far from Granada, and so I basically rode west across to get to nearer to the Portuguese border. I didn't get to the Portuguese border not on that day, but I wanted to get more to the west of Spain. I mean, I know Spain quite well. I've ridden a lot in Spain. I love Spain. I just, there's almost nothing I don't like about it apart from the east coast, which is crap because it's full of tourists. Yeah, my plan. I thought, right, I'm going to go west, and I'm going to get over to the west side, and I'm going to just do a road trip. I'd done me 500 kilometres on the TET, and I had enjoyed it, but I'd had enough of it. I think in future I'll do it differently, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, so I rode across to the west, went up the west side, went into Portugal, just to because I wanted to just see a bit of Portugal, because Portugal's a nice place. Stayed in my favourite hotel in Viseu, which was absolutely lovely, and then I went off to the northwest side of Spain, which in my view is the most beautiful bit of Spain there is. You know, when you go up the west side of Spain and you're going through the region called Extremadura, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, and then you sort of carry on up into the northwest. It is just spectacularly beautiful, really, really lovely. So, and that's what I did, and then I went back to Santander and to get the ferry home. I had some amazing experiences. I had wonderful hotels to stay in. I had some fantastic lunches. Absolutely, you know, like €12 lunches in a little out of the way town where nobody goes, and you're supporting the local economy, which I'm very keen on doing. Lovely people, just very, very nice experiences. So that was broadly how the trip went. Now, in terms of the bike, how did the bike go? Now, this was my first trip away on the Husqvarna 701. You know, I'd done about, I don't know, 1,500, 1,600 miles on it before I left, and I'd put a gel pad in the seat because, you know, otherwise it's like sitting on a board. Had the luggage on. The bike was set up. It was set up for what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the off-road, and I wanted to be able to ride on-road. The bike was very, very good. I mean, it was bloody good. I mean, as an off-road bike, it's absolutely brilliant. Although my skills need to improve. Although I'm not a bad rider, I think there were times when I either need to lower the gearing, or I need to ride more aggressively off-road to like push it a bit harder, and you know, give me a bit more experience, and I'll be doing that. But the bike performed brilliantly. Never missed a beat. I did. Hold on. I did 2,724 miles door to door, which is way more than I was expecting to do. So it was a pretty long trip, to be honest with you, on Husqvarna. You know, I was away for 2 weeks, so that was pretty good. Bike went really well. The luggage, the Rhino Walk luggage. Now, the Rhino Walk luggage is cheap. I think I paid £120 for two, and I think they're 14-litre bags each. But I'll put a little video on the screen, a walk around of the luggage and how it was on the bike. I mean, obviously I was travelling light. There's no point in having a light off-road bike if you're then going to fill it up with 60 kilos of luggage. I mean, why would anyone do that? Oh, unless you ride a GS, of course. So the luggage worked extremely well. I know some people, you know, it's not Moscow luggage or anything like that, or adventure spec. It worked fine. And it never fell apart. It stayed on the bike. It was very convenient. It held everything I wanted it to. I have absolutely no problems with the Rhino Walk luggage. Riding off-road, I mean, obviously when you're riding off-road, the bike is, you know, bucking around a lot. And I did find that there were times when I needed to tighten the straps because, pardon me, because it basically, the shaking around was just loosening things. But I mean, I've no idea if you'd get that with other luggage, excuse me. But that's what I got with this one, and it wasn't a problem. You know, you'd stop. I mean, you'd be stopping anyway, and just make sure the straps are tight and everything was fine. No problem at all with the luggage. Accommodation. My normal MO is to plan and book hotels in advance before I leave England. On this particular trip, because I didn't know where I was going to be when I was on the TET, I thought, well, I'll book as I go, and I think that was a mistake, simply because I like to make sure I'm staying in a nice place, and it takes time. You know, when you do a trip like this, there's a hell of a lot of planning involved, and you know, part of that planning is making sure that you're going to stay in a reasonable place. and I just, you know, sitting astride the bike under a tree to keep out the sun, on my phone trying to find a decent hotel was not easy, because I mean, there's loads of hotels, and you could say, well, why don't you just stop at any hotel? Well, I don't want to bloody stay at any hotel. I want to stay at a nice hotel, you know, because I can and I want to. So I'm not going to stay in a hostel. I'm not going to share a bed with a Romanian trucker, whatever her name is. You know, I found that a pain. I found it a flipping nuisance, and in future I will book hotels ahead. I'll plan better. So that was why. But accommodation, I mean, I stayed in some lovely hotels. I stayed in a couple of not good places, and that was you know, that was a consequence really of doing it on the fly. Problems. Were there any problems? Well, for number one, do not underestimate how difficult the TET can be. There were bits of it that were absolutely lovely and easy, but there was bits of it that were extremely tough. I mean, you know, you're going up often very steep, loose rock, and the chances of you falling is high. There was only one section that I decided I would go round it, and I'd done a bit of like a fire trail through a forest, come onto a bit of road up in the mountains somewhere, and I did about 500 meters on the road, and then it was taking me off road again, and there was a very steep slope with a lot of big gravel. When you get this sort of fist-sized gravel on the trails, it's really difficult, because with little gravel it moves obviously, but only moves like a millimetre or 2 or 5 or 10. Well, when you're on a fist-sized bit of gravel, and there's, you know, the whole sort of track is like, you move a lot. You know, you could move a whole tyre's width. And when you're trying to push up a hill, it can be challenging. And there was this one section, fist-sized gravel, bits of rock, boulders, and the only bit that you'd really want to ride on was on this left side, and it was about sort of this wide, say, I don't know, 30 centimetres wide. But to the left of it was a sheer drop into a ravine. And I thought, well, if I go up there and I get it wrong, I'm buggered. So I thought, do you know what? And I walked up it. I walked up it to see, you know, where it was going to go, and you know, how could I do it? Because I wanted to do the TET. You know, I wanted to do the route. Anyway, I decided that it would be prudent not to do it, so I didn't. And I rode about a kilometre down the road, and then the GPX file was saying, well, if you turn up here, you can get back to where you can get back to where you want, and I did, and that was tough. But I didn't have a ravine on my left to fall into, you know, to certain death, so that worked fine. So yeah, do not underestimate how tough it could be. I mean, on the TET website, you know, it tells you need to be physically fit, and I've said that in my previous video about the October tour. You know, you do need to be fit. It's very, very tiring. It's tiring simply by focusing constantly on staying upright. You know, I mean, that is tiring, but it's physically tiring. You know, the bike's moving around constantly, stuff like that. It's you know, be careful. Other problems, the bike. The bike did not have a problem. I had a problem with the Raid Garage auxiliary fuel tank, which is here. Because it's not in the bike for a reason, it leaked. It leaked from not from the banjo bolt, but from the actual mounting in the tank, and it leaked from day one when I installed it. And I thought that it was simply, I could smell this petrol. I couldn't see any leak when I fitted it. I fitted it, filled it up with fuel, and and I could smell petrol. And I thought it was just a consequence of maybe spilling a bit. But I had this constant sort of fuel smell, and I wasn't sure. Well, is it because I've got this? Is it because of this? You know, this breather that is the reason why I can smell the fuel. And anyway, I then the other thing I noticed when I was on the TET was my fuel range was not as good as I expected it to be. Now, when I'd finished doing the off-road and I started doing the on-road bit, my fuel range was poor, and I thought, well, it should be, I mean, exceptional given the additional tank, and the reason it was poor is because I was losing fuel. Anyway, got back and took the tanks off. I've been in touch with Raid Garage. They're sending me a replacement tank, which is fantastic. I mean, when I dealt with Raid Garage over the tank initially, they were extremely responsive, and I sent them an email yesterday. This morning there was an email waiting for me. I've ordered the thing. It should be here in 4 days. So I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine, and this is just a one-off. But that was the only problem I had with the bike. The other thing in terms of problems, but it's not really problems, it was the accommodation, because as I've said, for me it's better to book in advance, simply because you spend too much time trying to find a hotel you actually want to stay in on the road, and that's a waste of riding time. It could be done much better by doing it in advance. So in conclusion, what would I do differently? Well, first of all, I would definitely ride some more of the TET. I think trying to do 8 days TET, or planning to do 8 days TET, was way too ambitious, simply because it's too tiring, it's too boring. You're not really seeing much of where you are. So I think next time when I do some, and I will do some, in Spain, because I love Spain. I would basically, I'd say, do 2 days TET and then do a couple of days road to move to a different part of Spain to do some different trails, and then do another couple of days off road or something like that. Do a blend of on-road, off-road, rather than just focusing on the TET. I mean, one other thing to mention is when you're riding on your own, you are sort of mindful of, well, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if there's a problem? And I always thought, well, if I'll have phone range, I'll be able to phone. But if I don't have phone range, then it's possible someone will come along. Now, when I was, in the 500 kilometres I rode, I only met one other person on the TET. He was an Austrian chap. He was on a CRF 300, and he'd taken 5 weeks out to ride from Basel in Switzerland down to Portugal. And all through France, through Spain, all on the TET. I don't know where he was in terms of weeks of his journey. Probably had another week or 10 days to go. But he said the same thing. His view was, if I'm on my own, if I get into trouble, someone will come along. Well, they won't, or they almost certainly will not, because I literally saw him. And he said to me, I was the first person he had seen in 3 weeks of TET riding. So, and you are absolutely in the middle of nowhere. When I finished section 22, and I thought, right, I'm going to leave it here and I'm going to head west. I got my phone and I had a signal, and I put on to Google Maps, where I wanted to go. And I kept sort of scrolling out to see where I was, and I was literally in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It was lovely, but it said, go down this road for 72 kilometres and then turn right. And I thought, blimey, if you're going to go for 72 kilometres and you're not going to turn at any point, then you must be in the middle of nowhere, and it was amazing. It was absolutely beautiful, beautiful countryside. But yeah, if you're doing it, be careful. Be careful. Go with someone. I do it on my own, and I'm happy to do that, and I'll take care. So, what I would do differently, I'd blend it. I'd book accommodation. I'd plan better, plan more. Now that I've done the TET a couple of times, I've got more experience of how it works. I can plan better with that experience. So, in terms of the next trip, now I mentioned on my previous video that my next trip was Sweden and Finland on the TET. Now, having done this thing and discovered more about how the TET works and how it is for me, I've decided not to do that. I had ferries booked and I've changed one of them, and the other one I'll just have to eat it. But I've decided not to do that. And part of the reason is because my wife and I are going to spend some time in France, and we're going to be spending the summer in France, and I'll be doing trips from the French house. And so I will be doing more videos about trips, but I'm just not doing the Sweden and the Finland one. And the other thing that I am thinking of doing, and I wouldn't mind some feedback on this, is I having done, I mean, probably hundreds of thousands of miles touring and shared some of them with you, I think it would be a nice thing to do to arrange a tour in Spain for some other people. So my proposal is that I will plan a tour, okay, for maybe 6 days in Spain for people that perhaps have wanted to do a tour in Spain but maybe haven't had the confidence to do the tour. So I would be leading the tour. We will stay in Paradors because they're not stupidly expensive and they're a good standard. We would plan the route to the Parador between us each morning, and we would then ride 250, 350 miles. You know, I always think around sort of 300, 400 kilometres is a good sort of daily thing. Stop somewhere nice for lunch, stay in a nice place, and I would plan the route. So if that's something, and I would do this in September, so if that is something that you think you might be interested in doing, then put something in the messages, and I'll put well, actually you could send me an email. I'll put an email address on the screen, and you could drop me an email and just say, you know, yes, you'd be interested in doing it, or no, you wouldn't. Well, actually, you don't need to tell me if you wouldn't, because there's no reason to tell me that. But if it's something, if it's something that you think you might want to do, then let me know, because I'd just like to gauge interest and just see, you know, so if that's something that people might want to do. I mean, I'm not doing this as a business. I'm not doing this to start, you know, some money-making scheme. I just think it would be nice to share and to encourage people to enjoy what I enjoy. Okay, so that's what it's about. So that's it. When I get the tank from Raid Garage, I will do a video about swapping that over and some of the things that I discovered when I had the problem. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it hasn't gone on too long. It sounds like it might have done. And ride safe, and I shall see you next time. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.